Hello, I'm Dr. Danielle with a Q&A session. And the question is, what are disabilities for legal purposes? You may be aware that the words we use in common language may not have the same meanings as the meaning given by attorneys, judges, and the legal system. So let's look at the answer. The definition of disability under U.S. Code Title 42, Chapter 12102. I'm just going to read it as it is in the code. 1. Disability. The term disability means with respect to an individual, A. Physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities of such individual. B. A record of such an impairment, or C. Being regarded as having such an impairment as described in paragraph 3. We're going to go deeper and deeper in the meaning of this US code. So what does major life activities mean? In general, for purposes of paragraph 1, major life activities include but are not limited to caring for oneself. You need to be able to eat properly, to have physical activities, good hygiene, etc. Performing manual tasks. What are some manual tasks? Carrying, lifting, striking, pushing, pulling, throwing, holding. You must also be able to see, hear, eat, sleep, walk, stand, lift, bend, speak, and breathe. And also learn, read, concentrate, think, and communicate, as well as be able to work. We continue, we talk about major bodily functions. For purposes of paragraph 1, a major life activity also includes the operation of a major bodily function, including but not limited to functions of the immune system, normal cell growth, digestive, bowel, bladder, neurological, brain, respiratory, circulatory, endocrine, and reproductive functions. Your body needs to be able to function. It's a major life activity. Now, what does it mean to be regarded as having such an impairment for purposes of paragraph 1C? Let's look at it. An individual meets the requirement of being regarded as having such an impairment, and when you see a little asterisk, it means I'm going to go back on that subject. If the individual establishes that he or she has been subjected to an action prohibited under this chapter because of an actual or perceived physical or mental impairment, whether or not the impairment limits or is perceived to limit a major life activity. Paragraph 1C shall not apply to impairment that are transitory or minor. A transitory impairment is an impairment with an actual or expected duration of 6 months or less. Let's look at the rules of construction regarding the definition of disability. Definition of disability in paragraph 1 shall be construed in accordance with the following. A. The definition of disability in this chapter shall be construed in favor of broad coverage of individuals under this chapter to the maximum extent permitted by the terms of this chapter. B. The term substantially limits shall be interpreted consistently with the findings and purposes of the ADAAA Amendments Act of 2008. C. An impairment that substantially limits one major life activity need not limit other major life activities in order to be considered a disability. And D, an impairment that is episodic or in remission is a disability if it would substantially limit a major life activity when active. Let's continue. The determination of whether an impairment substantially limits a major life activity shall be made without regard to the ameliorative effects of mitigating measures, such as medication, medical supplies, equipment or appliances, low vision devices, which do not include ordinary eyeglasses or contact lenses, prosthetics, including limbs and devices, hearing aids and cochlear implants or other implantable hearing devices, mobility devices or oxygen therapy equipment and supplies, use of assistive technology, reasonable accommodations or auxiliary aids or services, or learned behavioral or adaptive neurological modifications. The ameliorative effects of the mitigating measures of ordinary eyeglasses or contact lenses shall be considered in determining whether an impairment substantially limits a major life activity. As used in this paragraph or subparagraph, the term ordinary eyeglasses or contact lenses means lenses that are intended to fully correct visual acuity or eliminate refractive error. And the term low vision devices means devices that magnify, enhance, or otherwise augment a visual image. There is no exhaustive list. Although there is not an exhaustive list of disabilities under the ADA, the regulations identify medical conditions that would easily be considered a disability within the meaning of the law. These medical conditions are deafness, blindness, diabetes, cancer, epilepsy, intellectual disabilities, partial or completely missing limbs, mobility impairments requiring the use of a wheelchair, autism, cerebral palsy, HIV infection, multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, schizophrenia. What I've seen in most of the courts in the United States, they are now prepared to offer accommodations for people who have wheelchairs and also for people who are deaf. There are interpreters available. What does substantially limit mean? I looked at the definition and found some interesting things in Illinois Legal Aid website. Sometimes it's as clear as muddy water that I'm talking about the legal verbiage. Sometimes I have to read it, and then also do some searching on the internet to find a different definition or an explanation. So what does it mean? The impairment has to have more than just a small effect on major life activities. It has to keep you from doing these activities substantially. However, the ADA defines substantially limit in a broad way that covers as many people as possible. Factors to look at in determining if an impairment is substantially limiting. The set of factors to look at depends on individual cases. Here are some common factors that might be considered. The difficulty, effort, or time it takes you to perform a major life activity. The pain you experience. The way the impairment affects how a major bodily function operates. Let's look at mitigating measures. Corrective measures do not disqualify you from the ADA. You should focus on how much you were limited before you use the corrective measure. You can look at what would happen if you stop using a corrective or mitigating measure. Medication. Medication can have some side effects. Medical equipment and devices, prosthetic limbs. Low vision devices that magnify an image. And we already said that if you wear normal eyeglasses to correct your vision, your eyesight is not considered disabled. Hearing aids, mobility devices, oxygen therapy equipment, use of assistive technology, reasonable accommodations, psychotherapy, behavioral therapy, and physical therapy. What does it mean, a record of history of disability? Sometimes the ADA considers you as having a disability even though there is no substantially limiting impairment. This can occur if you have a record of a substantially limiting impairment. It means that you either do not have a substantially limiting impairment now, but you had one in the past, or have been wrongly classified as having such an impairment. The ADA wants to prevent discrimination because of the history of disability. If your medical records show that you once had a disability but have now recovered, you're still protected. Even if you never really had a disability, you are covered as long as it's on your records. Examples. You've recovered sufficiently to perform all essential functions of a job, but an employer refuses to hire you due to your history of mental illness. You were mistakenly diagnosed as having HIV. A dentist refuses to treat you because of this wrong diagnosis. Regarded as having an impairment. Someone in public might believe you have a disability, even if you do not. They may treat you unfairly based on any impairment they believe you have. In this situation, you are considered disabled. This is true whether or not you have a substantially limiting impairment. Note, if you are only covered under this regarded as section, you cannot get reasonable accommodations. You may be considered disabled simply because you are denied employment or services, or benefits due to myths, fears, and stereotypes about disabilities. To summarize regarded as, and thank you to George for that summary that made things much clearer for me. A, an individual meets a requirement of being regarded as having such an impairment that is a perceived problem. If the individual establishes that he or she has been subjected to an action prohibited under this chapter, it's a wrongdoing. Because of an actual or perceived physical or mental impairment, it's a confusion. And then whether or not the impairment limits or is perceived to limit a major life activity, that's the bottom line. Reminded me of the problems we had with my son, who is a dwarf. Very intelligent, very smart, but he's a little person. And because he didn't look like the others, the school decided that he needed special education, that he probably had also mental problems, which was not the case at all, which we were able to prove. But this was perceived as having a mental disability just because he was not physically looking like the others. Let's broaden the subject. Who is truly disabled? Autism is regarded as being a disability. However, to compare to what some autistic artists can do, like Stephen Wiltshire, I am the one who is disabled. Look at what he did. Apparently, what I understand, he took a helicopter ride over Rome for about 20 minutes and came back and made an accurate drawing of what he saw. He's gone over several cities and did the same thing. Maybe autism is a disability, and for depending what you need to do, it is a disability. But on the other hand, he's doing amazing things. So what if we simply acted humanely toward each other? You may have seen this little cartoon that says for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. So who do you think is going to be able to climb that tree in the fastest way? Does an elephant climb a tree? No. Does it mean he's disabled? Well, in that instance, yes, because he cannot climb a tree. However, maybe the monkey would be disabled in other circumstances. And this slide tends to be stuck, so give me a minute. Here we go. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Einstein was a mathematical genius, but if people asked him about his phone number, he did not remember it. He had to look in the phone book. So if you want to know more about disability and what we can do to help you out, you can contact us. We have a physical address, a website, an email, and a phone number. And stay with us and stay tuned for more educational video. I hope to see you soon.